Hello and welcome to Nanapod, a podcast dedicated to the fantastic manga written by A. Yazawa. I'm Crystal, and I'm joined by my best girl Kirsten as we dissect this manga, discussing everything from the emotions, the cultural impact, as well as any headcanons that might be floating around in our brains. With this podcast, we hope to preserve a shoujo staple that sadly hasn't been talked about in a very long time. So come with us. We're waiting for you in apartment 707. Hello everyone, and welcome to Nanapod. Let's see. It looks like we are on chapter 55 of volume 15. We're getting there, guys. We are a little more than halfway through. So I'm just going to get right into this guy here. It just says, at the very beginning of the chapter, I became Nana Ichinos. Heart. And then we have some camera people here because if you remember, Takumi kind of agreed to give up his privacy in order to keep Nana and Ren safe. So now they're meeting with all the skeezy guys, and they're gonna take some photos. So there's a card here, and it says Minoru Kurata, photographer for Weekly Search, and he says, "Hello, I'm Kurata, the photographer." And Hachi takes it, and she's like, "Nice to meet you." And he's looking at her, like he's sizing her up, like he's taking in her eyes and like her mouth and face at the bottom. And then he goes over to Takumi and he's like, "Your wife's so cute. Where'd you meet her?" And to be clear, he's still sick and he's wearing a mask. So, again, good on him for not getting other people sick, but you still suck, dude, because you work for this shitty magazine. Anyway, Hachi turns around and she's got like the little blush lines and flowers and she's like, "Cute?" And Takumi says, "I'll answer that in the interview. Let's get this going before people come." And he's like, "Sure," with a sweat bead. And then Hachi's thinking, wait, don't fall for his flattery. It's still the sleazebag Search. Search made Nana out to be some horrible slut, and they even wrote about Yasu like he's totally evil. Grrr. And she's got the tick, tick, tick over her head, and is like, "But no matter how annoying it is, I'll just smile, my sales lady smile. I'm good at that." And it's true, she hasn't done that part in a while. And then Kurata's like, "Act naturally. Arm in arm like you're real close." "Oh, I guess you already are." Yeah, because she's she's clinging on to Takumi. And Hachi's thinking they better not write smack about Takumi. But out loud she says, "Please make me look as cute as possible, Heart. You're the pro." And Takumi, with a sparkle, is like, "Feel free to Photoshop the pictures if necessary, so she looks hot." Takumi probably did not say that in the original. So that's cringe. But anyway, Kurata's laughing and he's like, "All right, let's start shooting. Please talk and walk slowly." And Hachi looks at him with her little flowers over her head and she's like, "What do you want for dinner tonight?" And he's like, "You're talking about dinner at 6 a.m? I'm getting hungry just thinking about it." Well, yeah, dude, like, she doesn't go outside, you know, because he semi-isolated her from her friends. Anyway, Kurata's like clicking away, and she's like, "Okay, how about breakfast?" And he's like, "An omelet with something weird drawn on it, Heart." And then she just laughs and is smiling, all really, really happy, and there goes a click. And now we have a scene change to the Weekly Search editorial department. And the greasy mosquito is like, "God damn it, that Takumi, he faked us out." And our younger boss man mosquito is like, "Well, he is pretty sharp. I'm actually impressed. Looks like he's not just a flaky musician. He should be a businessman. And Greasy Mosquito, so angry. He's like, did you see how he turned into a totally different person? He made fools of us, damn it. I'm like, actually, he made a fool of you, but okay. And the other mosquito is like, well, he won't go around bragging about it, or he'd make even more enemies, like you do. And then he turns around this picture of Hachi, and he's like, that's why he has a friendly, accommodating wife. Ah, Heart. I can see why he's with her, Heart. This guy's so creepy. He's so creepy. But, I mean, like, he's not wrong. She is a good wife. But, like, he means it in a weird way. And Greasy Mosquito, really mad. I don't care about a nobody like that. Sir, rude. And then kind of a semi-scene change. You know, there is a scene change here, but I do believe it's the same building. And we have Kurata, and he's like, I've seen that girl somewhere before. And this other guy, the other guy with the, the receding hairline, all the slick back hair. And he's like, what girl? And Kurata says, Takumi's wife. And Slickback says, oh, I saw those photos, but there are a lot of girls with that hairdo. I know someone who looks like that too. She works at a kabkura? I don't know what that is. Hold on, I want to look up what that is. Oh, okay, so it is a host and or hostess at clubs. Specifically nightclubs found primarily in Japan, with mostly female staff, and caters to men seeking drinks and attentive conversation. Okay, so kind of like an escort business, but they stay put. Anyway. I mean, yeah, there's hairstyles that are also really popular during the early 2000s, so it kind of makes sense. But Kurata's like, but I always see through it when the people I shoot disguise themselves. I'm good at that. I've seen that face somewhere for sure. Where though? And then here comes a female mosquito. Her name is Fumi. And she's like, maybe you saw her when you were stalking Nana from Blast. And Slickback says, what? And she says, Takumi's wife is Nana's ex-roommate. And this is Fumi Sugawara, 30, single, weekly searches only female employee. Okay. I'm gonna say something kind of mean about Fumi, but like, if she's the only female employee, it could be, one, that it is a primarily male-dominated type thing for all of this kind of stuff, because there's a lot of misogyny that goes on around here. But again, this is a sleazy magazine and not stuff that is printing worthwhile news. So I think Melissa would probably disagree with me, but she could be a pick-me. Could be a pick-me. And I'm not saying that she is. I'm saying that she might be. But anyway, Kurata's like, that's it. And Slickback says, really? Well, that's interesting. And Kurata's like, I feel better now that I figured it out, Heart. It's like, you didn't figure it out, she told you. But anyway. And then Fumi's like, well, not really. And then she snaps her chopsticks apart. And she's like, Takumi said it himself in the interview. Of course we got closer because she's Nana's best friend. You know what that means, right? And Slickback, like, has like these small blush lines with like a sweat bead, and he's got this image in his head of Takumi and Ren, and they are in high school uniforms, and Nana and Hachi are in schoolgirl uniforms, and he's like, their bands are like going out with each other. It's like close, not really. And then Kurata's like, that means Ren and Nana really are a couple. Did you doubt that part of it, Kurata? Okay. You did all that digging into her past. Like, nothing came up about her and Ren being together. I'm pretty sure that it did. So, like, why are you saying that? Anyway, Fumi is like, it means we can't write that Nana and Ren's engagement is fake. All we got is two celebrity couples for people to adore. We got totally played by Takumi. You fucking did, girl. Yeah, you fucking did. And then Slickback is like, if he foresaw all this and it worked, that's amazing. And she's like, I know. I'm pissed, but very impressed. And he's hot. Heart. And Kurata's like, I'm totally pissed. I took the best photos, but they'll never get published. All that work for nothing. And Slickback says, not for nothing. Nana saw them. And Kurata's like, fine, Nana saw them, but still, this sucks. And then Fumi's like, what? How did Nana see those photos? And Slickback says, we had them delivered to her as an engagement gift. Heart. See, this is why you guys are the actual villains of Nana. You people fucking suck. And then Fumi looks really shocked and she says, actually, respectfully, is like, wow, what jerks, you guys are going to hell. Scary, 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 scary. And it's like, yeah, you guys are. And Slickback is like, the editor took us to a fancy eel dinner for that one, Heart. And Kurata's like, but we got only one wanju each. What cheap asses. And there's a little note down here that says, wanju is rice in a box with grilled eel on top. And then Fumi says, but people talk about those two like they're the perfect couple. Would they break up just 'cause we're screwing with them? And Slickback says, well, if they do break up, it's 'cause it was meant to be. Trash. Trash. And then Fumi says, the strength of their bond will be tested. I'm up for the challenge. Heart. See, it's gross. I don't like it. I really don't like it. Like, you're, okay, girl, so, like, you're totally on board with the idea and, like, knowing, like, okay, these guys are definitely going to hell for doing something that was really, really cruel. But at the same time, like, you're going to test the bonds of their relationship via whatever made-up shit that you're going to try to, you know, spew about them. That's just fucked up. Which is why I said she could be a pick-me. Because this is fucked. This is base-level gross shit. Anyway, scene change, I believe. There's a plop of the Weekly Search magazine. Onto Yasu's laptop by Nana. And then she's like, why isn't it in there? What do you know about this? Yasu doesn't say anything, and she sits down next to him with a plop. And then he hands her a phone. And he says, ask Ren yourself. Don't talk to him through me. Which, you know what? Good boundary setting, Yasu. But Nana looks pissed off. You know, and he's just, not breaking. And then she says, when he's back, I'll ask him. I have to look him in the eye to tell if he's lying or not. That's why I can never tell what you're thinking. Because he's wearing his sunglasses. And then he stands up. Or rather, she stands up. And that's not true. Like, I don't actually think that that's true. She's still mad at him because he's trying to have a life outside of her. I know that this is repetitive and it's obvious to everyone. Because Nana being so codependent, now she's lashing out at Yasu for just no reason, Yeah, and definitely, like, you like the idea of him. You like the idea of him being in love with you. But now that it appears that he's falling out of love with you, you don't like it. And it's not fair, Nana. And she gets up and she goes and sits on the other side of their train. Because I think they're on a train. Or they could be on an airplane. One of the two. And I think in the back here, we kind of see Genpai, and he's looking at Nana, so I think he just witnessed that whole exchange, and he looks worried. And then we have the think boxes, and it says, when Nana gets back to Tokyo, I have to go see her right away and tell her I got married. And Hachi's looking at her ring. And it says, you'll just smile and congratulate me. And she's thinking back to the time when Nana was like in disguise and said, so just be happy no matter what, all right? I can now say I'm happy from the bottom of my heart. And we have a scene change to a hotel room. And it's Yuri. And she's like, hey, what time is it? To Miyu. And Miyu's like, don't keep asking me every minute. And then Misato was like, it's 5:37. They'll be back soon. And then Yumi's like, I know more about Nobu than you do. Step off. Oh... No, girl. No, you do not, actually. Yuri, you know nothing. Masato is the great keeper of all things blast. So, but she doesn't know that. And Masato's not going to tell her. So Masato kind of turns around and she's like, sorry, with a sweat drop. And then Miyu was like, why are you slacking around here instead of going to work? How long are you staying in the dorms anyway? And Masato says, well, actually, Mr. Sugimura put me in the dorms to help everyone out around here. And it's me, Masato, who's supposed to meet and greet the band. And then Miyu, catching that, says, oh, wait. You called yourself Masato again. She's so clever. And then Masato has her hand up to her mouth like, oh, I didn't mean to say that out loud. And then Yuri is like, yeah, what's this Masato crap? You're just an assistant and you got some stage name? Who do you think you are? And then Mia was like, it's a name she used when she was a fangirl. It must have stuck. So dorky. And Masato's got the sweat drops and the dots. And then Yuri's like, really? Mai, you were a groupie? Who'd you stalk? Who'd you sleep with? And then Miyu says Blackstones. And now that's not good. I mean, it's the truth, but it's not good because, Yuri is clearly jealous. So she's like, what? And she just stares at the other girl and she's like, what was the president thinking? How can he leave some obsessive fan, let some obsessive fan work here? That's crazy. And Miyu's like, Mai says Mr. Kanimoto liked her. Go get him attitude. But I'm sure Sugimura has other ideas. And Masato is blushing and sweat drops everywhere. And then Miyu says, if it doesn't work out in one way, they can have her take her clothes off to earn her keep. And Masato looks like this is the first time this has ever occurred to her because her eyes get real big and she's got a sweat drop. And then Yuri's like, oh, I get it. They can sell her as a Lolita type. Sugimura knows what kind of women sell. It's the only thing he's good at. This is a terrible conversation, even though they're not wrong. She goes on to say, you should take your clothes off. You'd make a lot more money that way. And then you'd earn that stage name. I really, I want to believe that is something that she is saying genuinely, but I do think that she's saying it in a way that is unhealthy. But Miyu says, if you don't want that happening, you'd better work hard. And then Misato's like, I promise I will! And she's yelling. And then here comes the band, looking just amazing in all their punk attire. And Nobu's like, hey, we're home, heart. And then the, oh god, he was the guy who was kind of at the front desk. Front desk guy who's really old and kind of mean looking. He is hanging up a poster of Yuri, who's doing something naughty, because she's naked. And we can tell, because we can see her boobs. Anyway, And he just kind of looks at them like, ugh. And then there's a ring, and Genpai answers the phone. He's like, hello, heart. And then Nobu's like, what are you putting up there? Rip it down. And then, oh God, Shin is like, hey, I want one, heart. And then Nana says to this guy, she says, I got you a souvenir, Yamagishi. Oh, that's his name. Did you behave yourself? And he says, why are you back in the dorms, Nana? You guys break up already? That was quick. And she's got the stress lines, and she's like, shut up. I'm going to go meet our new manager. And Shin's like, I heard she's cute. My heart. Can't wait to meet her. And Yamagishi's like, yeah, because I think she got him sake. And Nobu's like, think she'd do my laundry, heart? I know Asami won't. Nobu, you're being spoiled. And Yasu's like, do it yourself. And then Genpai's like, you guys go ahead of me, heart. And then there's a ding as they go to the second floor. And Yuri has jumped up, and she's like, hey, they're back. Jump. And the door slides open, and she comes out into the hall with a stomp. And he's like, Asami. And she's really excited, and she's got tears in her eyes and blushes, and she's like, welcome back, Nobu, heart. Eek! And she just slams into him with a bam. And then I think Yasu might have just noticed this no smoking on the door because, like, he's got the stress lines and, like, his cigarette has popped out of his mouth. And then Shin's like, she really does only see Nobu now. It's alright, though. And Nana's like, she's so rude. Nana, stop. You just don't like it because people are moving on. And then Mayu comes out into the hall, and she's like, welcome back, guys. And Shin says, Miu, we're home, heart. And she says, you must be beat. And then Yasu looks at Mayu, and she looks at him, and they just give each other these really gentle smiles. And then she goes back into the room, and Shin notices Masato, and he says, huh? And Nana says, what? And then Yasu goes, and there's Masato with her short hair, and she's standing there and got a sweat drop. And then she bows. And she says, welcome home. And they're all like, Masato? And we have a scene change. And it is 11:18 at 18:15, and it's from Shin. It says, tonight. It's a reply. It says, we're having a welcome party for our new manager, so I'll be a little late, but I'll definitely come over. Clinging to Nana. And everyone's in this room, and they're talking blah, 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 blah. And she's thinking about when they had seen those pictures and how everybody reacted. All of their handlers. We had the heavier set gentleman with the glasses who's like, you know your celebrity status. You have to watch everything you say and do. And then their female handler who's like, I'm just happy that ... And then our other, like, blonde, spiky-haired kid who's like, Takumi told me not to tell anyone. And now he's sitting at the table, and he's like, but Ren and Rira, you were being careless and clueless. So you always let Takumi be the cool guy? I don't like that. And Rira's like, clueless? And she's like, we're both really sorry. It's just the way we are. And Ren says, Kinoshita, why do you hate Takumi so much? Really? And Kinoshita says, I don't. I have nothing but respect for him now. And Ren looks up at him, and he's like, he comes across as self-centered because he's autocratic. But he's actually the most observant and careful, always thinking of what's best for the band. He keeps the damage to a minimum, just not personally, but from all points of view. I actually wish that more of the fans would be like Kinoshita, because you don't have to like Takumi, but you have to realize the vital role that he plays within this band, and also as just a character and a person. So, Ren looks at him, and he smiles, kind of like in this, like, all right, I see you. Yeah, you're finally getting it. And then Kinoshita says, I'll work hard. Up till now, I felt lucky just to work for you, Ren, but now I'll proudly work as Castle Trapnest's vassal. So please don't tell anyone I told you this, or else I'll get fired. And Rira says, sure, we understand, heart. And Ren's got a sweat drop, and he's like, well, I can't just pretend I didn't hear it. Whatever, blabbermouth. And then they both look at him. Kinoshita looks worried, like, oh shit. And Rira is actually looking at Ren like, are you seriously going to tell everyone that he said that? And then Ren just kind of says, but I'll keep it in mind. I'm glad you told us. And then Rira kind of puts her head down because they're all standing around and just kind of talking and chattering, and she's just kind of by herself, and Takumi's looking at, I think, sheet music. Anyway, there's a scene change, and there's a clack, 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 because they're all playing mahjong. And then Nana says, well, I'm really psyched that you care about us this much, Misato. And Nobu says, we were always saying to be awesome if you were our manager, Heart. And she's like, thank you so much. And she's crying. And then Nana goes in and just like gives her this big hug. And she's like, oh, Misato, Heart. And she's like, Nana, Heart. And Nobu has the dot dots with the blush lines. And Yuri is like, oh, she's with Nana, Heart. Then we've got nothing to worry about. She thinks that Misato is, gay for Nana, which she kind of is. She kind of is. And Shin's like, that means Ren is mine. It's a joke. It's not. It's in poor taste a little bit, but it's a joke. And Miu says, sorry, but why does everyone keep calling her Misato? And Yasu says, because that's the name we know. What's Mai? And Yuri says, it's all good. Consider it her nickname. And Miu says, but you should keep business separate. And Shin says, well, I thought that was her real name. And Nobu says, me too. If you went by a more normal name, people would think it was real. Most girls just go by their real name first. And she says, you're right, sorry. And Nana says, you should have told us when we first became friends. You're so shy. She's so sneaky. And Yasu's like, well, really, who cares? She can call herself whatever she wants. And Nobu says, yeah, it's cool, don't worry about it. And she's got the dots with the stress lines and is like, all right. And then Nana says, oh, by the way, isn't there a groupie named Misato Uehara? And Misato kind of stops with a sweat bead, with a sweat drop. And Nobu's like, yeah, there is. I saw her Purikura. That's another one that I have to look up. Hold on. Oh, okay. So, Purikura are kawaii photo booths, popular in Japan. I've seen those pictures. Yeah, okay. And then Masato was all looking, still sweat drop, just listening. And then Nana's like, I should have pulled that letter out. Where's she from? And Shin says, Osaka. And Nobu says, really? You have such a good memory. And now Masato, with the line, with the dots over her head, she has not said anything. But it's clear that she's starting to panic. And then Nana's like, yeah, Osaka. Because she lives in an okonomiyaki restaurant. The best ever. Big eyes, big panic from Masato. And Yuri's like, but you can eat okonomiyaki anywhere. And Shin looks annoyed and he's like, I know it's Osaka. I don't forget cute girls. Which, you know what, that's fine because at least they're of an age. So it's all good. And Yasu says, just because she was in Osaka doesn't mean she's from there. And Miyu says, and there could be girls with that name anywhere. And he says, so Masato, why did you decide to call yourself that? Shin, do you know? Do you suspect? And they all just look over at her and she says, I got a fortune teller to help me pick a name that would get me closer to Nana. And I think that the fortune teller part of that is wrong, but I think the second half of that is the truth. And then they all look at her, and Nana's got like the blush lines with a sweat bead, and Shin's like, a fortune teller? And then Nobu's like, no way! Well, they sure picked the right name. And Nana is just like laughing. She's just so pleased. And we have a scene change to the okonomiyaki. And there's a stomp, stomp, stomp of fishnet encased feet. And here's the real Masato. And she's like, I'm going out for a bit. And her mother's like, where are you going? It's so late at night. And I think this is her father. He's like she says a friend's house. And her dad's like, what are you wearing? And she's like, bye. Because she's wearing like a spiked collar and a leather jacket. And like short shorts. And yeah, the whole, she looks just like her sister. Because we all know. And then her mother's like, what friend? And her dad's like, Masato. And here's her little friend standing outside. Fujimoto, she says, and Fujimoto just smiles. And she's like, Uehara, don't you look cool? You look like Nana, heart. And she's like, but it's my brother's jacket. It's too big. I'm too broke to get my own. And Fujimoto's like, it's fine. It looks good on you. And then Masato, real Masato, says, you know where the place is? We only have the street address. And Fujimoto says, I got a map off the internet, heart. Girl, if it's MapQuest, I swear to God, if it's MapQuest. And here's a scene change to this place, and it says zero in, and there's kind of like this, looks almost like a snake staff that's holding this sign. And real Masato was like, is this a bar? It looks weird. Will they even let us in? And Fujimoto's like, we have to act like we're not freaked out. Let me deal with it. Yeah, you guys are like, what, 14? Like, how are you going to deal with it? These are, okay. Anyway, so she looks at her like, oh, and there's a click, and then there's a crack. And there is a full-grown adult standing outside of this, and he's punky, and he's smoking, and he's all tattooed up. And he just looks at them, and he's like, welcome. And real Masato was thinking, he works here? The guard dog? And Fujimoto's like, because she's sweating, and she's like, I think my big sister's here. We can come in and look for her. And he says, come on in. Again, full-grown adults. This is so sketchy. Anyway, so they go in, where all these adults are, and real Masato's thinking, what's up with this place? With all these people just hanging around. What kind of shop is this? It's probably not a shop. And then Fujimoto was like, I found her. There she is. And it's Shion sitting over there. She looks so pretty. Smoking a cigarette with her little lace gloves, and she's wearing a Vivian Westwood necklace and a black corset. And her friends are there with her too. And we have a scene change. And then there's a clack of a mahjong. And Miyu says, run. Toi toi san anko. And they all look. Oh my goodness. And Yasu looks like, what the hell? Never been beat before? And Nobu is shocked face, shocked impressed face. And sorry, I'm slightly sleepy because we went on a trip to the coast this weekend, and it was really lovely. But I wish I had more vacation time, so I'm a little wiped out. So names are kind of a problem for me at the moment. But Yuri has like a, very shocked face, and Shin looks pissed. Like, how dare you win? That's my thing. And then there's a shuffle as Genpai comes in, and he's like, oh no, you guys are still playing? Shut it down, it's midnight already. And they all glare over at him. And then Shin is like, what? How'd it get so late? Damn. And Miyu's like, who cares? They've got tomorrow off. And Yasu says the game hasn't even started yet. He's so mad about losing. And then Yuri is like, well, we need some time alone. And Nobu's like, all right, jump, let's hit it. And Genpai's like, they're so lovey-dovey. It's sick. Bro, stop. And then she's like, let's sleep in my room tonight, Heart. I'm scared of Miyu. And then Shin says, oh, he's just splitting because he's losing so bad. And there's a ring. And then Miyu was like, Nana, get in the game. And Nana, I think, has been drinking because she's got the blush lines, and she's like, yeah! She stands up very quickly, and then Genpai is like, no, Nana, you're going home. I'll drive you. And you're drunk again. And she's like, what? And she's like falling over into him. And he's like, Ren's waiting for you. And Misato is like, yes, he is. Sorry. And then Shin puts his hat on. He says, I want to go too. I want to see Ren, Heart. And Genpai's like, what do you mean, Shin? You want to get in the mix? And Shin is thinking, in the mix? And there's like a little snake emoji down there. And then Nana, very drunk, is like, why not? Let's live together. Just the three of us. And Genpai's thinking, something must have gone down with her and Ren. I can't deal with a breakup right now. Not so fair. And then Masato is out there, and she's like, good night, and she bows. And there's a silence, and Miyu's got the dot dots. And then Yasu was like, should we call it a night? And Masato says, all right, I'll clean up. And then he says, no, it's all right. You're the guest of honor tonight. Even though it ended in Mahjong Mania. And she says, please let me do my job. Otherwise, there's no reason for me to live in the dorms with all of you. And he smiles like, okay. And he says, all right then. We'll run you ragged. And she says, please do. And I think she wants this mostly because she's afraid of, if she doesn't do a good job or doesn't do anything correctly, that she'll have to take her clothes off. And I don't blame her for panicking. And then, Miyu's kind of got like almost kind of like a thinking, maybe a little bit of a sad look on her face. And then Yasu says, we had some issues while on tour, and Nana got a little down. And she says, really? And he says, but I think she's better now, thanks to you, Masato. And there's just a pause after looking at him with like oh? And he says, we mostly need you to take care of Nana. We're counting on you. And she says, of course! And I mean, of course she obviously would. But you know what? It is actually a good thing because Yasu is stepping away because he needs his own life. And Masato is the perfect person to fill that hole. Like, to fill that gap. Because she will always be loyal to Nana. So, although... And I think this is one of maybe one of the mysteries, but so far in the future calls and texts and the flash forwards that we see, I haven't seen Masato in them. So, yeah. one of the mysteries that needs to be wrapped up in this manga. And she says goodnight. And then, Yasu and Miyu are just walking away. And there's a scene change. And it's Hachi. And she says, Nana's late. Maybe they had a welcome party for Masato? And Ren says, why don't you call Baldy and ask? And she says, but I don't want to rush them. And Takumi says, well, I'm out of here. You guys can deal with it. And he just kind of jumps up. And she's like, what? Looking very like, what do you mean? And he says, I need to be working on the new album. I don't have time for slacking around. And Ren says, is that why you're acting so weird and fidgety? You're such a workaholic freak. Which is true, he is. And then he says, I'm going to crash at Akasaka. You stay here, but not too late. And then she smiles at him. And then there's a ding of floor 26. And Takumi's like looking down at his phone and stuff, and there's a slide. And when he looks up, Shin and Nana are on the other side of the elevator. And it is a little weird because he is dialing one of his girlfriends. It says Kasagi on his phone. So, like, he is going to go crash, but he's going to go get laid at the same time. It's fucked up. Anyway, and then there's a ... And he says, welcome back, Heart. And Nana just does not talk to him. She flipped, and he says, you're still ignoring me? Let's be civil. And Shin is just sort of walking by like, you didn't see me, you didn't see me. But Takumi turns around and he says, where are you going? And Shin stops with like a sweat drop. And now he's thinking of something that Hachi has said to him, which is, let me handle it, and you just concentrate on your work. And then Takumi's going in the elevator, and he's like, Nana's in there waiting for you, Heart. And they both look, and they're like, what? But the elevator is slid closed. And now it's Hachi, and she's like, welcome back, Heart. And they're both thinking of the little dog, and, just smiling and pleased. And then Nana says, puppy dogs aren't allowed in hotels, even ones that pretend to be human. And then Hachi's like, I'm glad I get to see you too, Shin, Heart. What'd you come here for? And he says, work. And she's like, what work? And then Ren turns around in his chair and he's like, welcome back, Heart. And Shin has taken his hat off and he is flying towards him. And he's like, honey, I'm home, Heart. And Hachi's like, honey? And he just lays another kiss on Ren. And this is the second time that this has happened. And I know that the people are freaking out and being like, oh my god, guys, he's still underage. He's still underage. Like, if you're going to hold, like, all of these standards and stuff for how gross you think Rira is for sleeping with him, you still need to hold the same standards for Ren for kissing him, even though it's all a joke. You know what I mean? Sorry, I'm laughing because Hachi's like, what kind of work is that? And Nana's like, don't worry about it. Just ignore them. And now Shin is fully sitting in Ren's lap, and Ren is just holding him. And Ren is like, did you hear that? My girlfriend's so cold. And Shin says, she's just jealous. I guess I'm in the way. Heart, I'll come back later. If none of y'all can tell that this is a joke, I don't know what to tell you. Like, this is just some fierce banter. And I really, really, one of my favorite things about this whole, like, dynamic between them is how unserious it is and how unbothered either of them are by their own sexuality. And I think Lisa and I might have discussed Shin and Ren as being some spectrum of bisexual, but, we're not going to out anybody or say that because we would rather the characters tell us than speculate. So anyway, Shin puts his hat back on and he says, Sorry for cramping your mix. And then Hachi's like, don't leave yet. And Nana says, and speak proper Japanese. Say something. And he turns around and he's got like very soft eyes now. And he says, sorry, Mommy. Since I was gone so long, I got a lot of customers to attend to. It's his mom. I just get very emotional every time he calls her mom. And then she just kind of pauses, and she's letting him go, kind of. And the think boxes say, oh yeah, Rira lives in this hotel too. And then she grabs his arm and she's like, Shin, wait! I have something important to tell you guys. I want you both to know. So can you stay for a little bit? And he says, sure. And Ren's drinking his soda and our beer over there, just kind of quiet and thoughtful. And Nana says, what is it? What's so important? And Shin's waiting, and she takes this dramatic pause. And then she says, Takumi and I got married. And she's just smiling. And then Shin is looking at her, and then he looks over at Nana to gauge her reaction. And we haven't seen anything from her yet. She's just like, we can't see anything behind the sunglasses she's wearing. And now we have the narration. And it says, hey Nana, I couldn't see through to your loneliness that day. Not because of the shades that shielded your heart. I idolized you, Nana. But my self-centered assumptions clouded my eyes, blinding me. And that's the end of the chapter. And we are ending on Yasu being in Miyu's room. And he has taken his glasses off. And he and Miyu are kissing. And we can see them kissing through the aquarium that she has here. So kind of, a lot of emotions in this particular chapter. Masato. I do really wish that I knew what happened to fake Masato in the future, since we don't get to see that. Or at least I do not recall anything about that. I'll amend it, of course, if it crops up, but at this point, nothing and no one. So, anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me. And yeah, this is going to be the norm for me reading Nana kind of back to back with my other videos. So yeah, we are probably going to blow through about the last 6 volumes of this fairly quickly. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you all in the next one. Good night.